Hello, my name is Dom Slightum and I'm here today to show you my coursework for Immersive Games Technologies. My initial pitch was to develop a game inspired by Doom, so I'd implement a simple first-person shooter style game where the player moves around a small environment using basic movement. My main goal was to implement shooting, but I did not get that far. But I managed to do a 3D movement where you can move the camera around using your mouse and move the player using WSD or the arrow keys. So a project similar to this is this one here. So C++ OpenGL 3D game engine, 1990s Doom style. It was by 3D Sage. So this is kind of a 3D map editor as well as Doom. But it uses, well, it doesn't really look that 3D, but I've tried to go for a 3D kind of format. So I'll run through the code and then I'll show you the project, and then after I'll do an evaluation of what I thought. So here I've got my libraries. These values here are the ones that are passed through the header file, so I'll show that shortly. Um, these are part of the MVP, so this is what's passed through to calculate the MVP and calculate the player movement. This calculate the speed of the player. These cube positions and cube sizes are what are looped through to make walls. And then I've got my standard shader program, my sky shaders, my buffers, my textures, my monitor. These variables here are for the mouse. Then I've got Skybox variables and just standard shader variables, so my lighting. Here is my method declaration. So all the methods I need to declare all here. Load textures are similar to what I was before, but here I'm loading two textures, and I'm got this here to check the RGB format. Because before it was just RGB and RGBA, but this format here is able to determine the RGB format, so I don't get any issues loading in different types of images. So I run it through once for the ground texture, and then I run it through again for the grass texture, because these two textures pass through the same shader. And then I activate it and I bind the texture, and yep. Display is quite simple, it's just clear the background color and set the depth on. And then shader here is how I load in my shader. MVP, so I initialize GLFFW in glue. I create my window, error handling if they can't load. Set the primary monitor and basically check for the mouse. So if the mouse leaves the screen or the mouse is moving, it will always check that and the player will move. And then here's how I load in my shader. Load in my textures, render my ground. Init GUI, what's done on the other CPP. Start game, what's also done on the other CPP. So start game is how it does my ammo and everything, and my init GUI is my GUI. And draw my skybox. So these methods are called before, well, called at the beginning of a project, but they're not looped through when the project is running. Here, so I have my display method running constantly, my process input running constantly, my window management constantly, and my track stats. So track stats is just like if you shoot, you lose one ammo. The process input is tracking your movement constantly, like inputting it. Here, so I create the projection matrix using the width, the height. So here I just thought it was better to do it like this instead of hard coding it, just because if my screen gets bigger, then it could mess it up. So I've just used it like that. View, the view is made using the camera position. The camera position to add the camera front. So the camera front is what's in front of you. The position is where you are, and then camera up. With the times both these together and pass them through the shader program. Here, I make a lighting position and I pass the lighting position and the ambient lighting, what's above, into the program as well. And then depth, I also pass that through as well. Render skybox is basically just rendering the skybox what's done in a different method. I just wanted to have clean code, so I thought if I try and get everything in different methods as much as I can, then I'll be able to like understand the project well and separate things together. So I use the shader program, I send the texture to it, I activate the texture and bind it, and then I run through this loop and make the model, assign the model to the array of cube sizes and the cube positions. So basically, for example, if the loop is the third time looping through, it will go and set the scale to the third size and cube sizes, and same for cube positions. And then I bind my position array, color array, texture, and normal. So normal is used in the colors, but no, normal is used in the lighting, sorry. And then color, texture, and position is just used in the general model. Then I bind it to my triangles VAOs, and I draw my elements and send all this data to the shader program. And then similar here, but because I'm only doing one image, I've got the hard-coded variables here. So I do the same, scale it, I rotate it to get the texture on the right thing, and then translate it, and then enable vertex array for all of them again, bind it, send the data to the shader program. So this will basically just loop through constantly, because if it doesn't loop through constantly, then it will just render it once and just not render it again. So when you load it up, you see that the images, like the models aren't rendered, but that's because you would only render it once. So because you've got it in this loop, it will constantly render. And then the debug GUI is just to show my general GUI. Swap buffers and pile events is to just track input constantly. And then I just clean up GUI here, and I close the program. RenderGround, as we saw above, is just basically, it has the vertices, intensities, colors, texture coordinates, and normals, and it's just binding it all together with these values here. Process input, so I can click with delta time, and then I'll times delta time by the speed, and then I'll use the speed for moving around. So as you see, camera position, I can move forward, move back, move left, move right, using the arrow keys or WASD. And then for left and right, it's a bit different to forward and back. So we've got to normalize the variables, as you can see here, but a forward and back is quite simple enough. And then here I have sprint functionality. So if you hold down shift, you're able to sprint forward and back. And then when you let go with shift, you go back to normal speed. And frame buffer is just assign it there. The mouse, this is just to make the mouse go left or right and move the camera as well. Load Skybox is similar to how we load in the textures, but because we're loading in multiple textures and assign it to a cube map, as you can see we can do assign it to the cube map, we've got to do a loop through with the size of the faces vector array being passed through. And then bind it all here. Same, so here we have the vertices, we bind it all together. And then we have the faces vector of all the images, load the images in using this, and then we send the images to the shader program, and this is how we render the Skybox. The Skybox doesn't actually render, well, it renders, but everything what should be images goes to white, so I feel like it's a 50-50 working. But I got QMap working, but the images don't work. So here I've got my floats, what I pass through. My GUI, I won't go through this too much, but it's basically, this is what initializes it. This is what runs through constantly, so this is all my buttons to show like frame rate, graphics, and everything like that. Gamepad, so if you've got your gamepad connected, as I have, you'll be able to track your variables here, and if you press X, you're able to shoot. And this is where it just cleans it all up. Player, so basically tracks the ammo count, and then if you're out of ammo, you call the reload method, add health, remove health, die. But I haven't actually got the health feature working. Sound is just basically, it will just play the sound if the program is active, and it will just call this method. So yeah, just go show this one more time. So basically, for example here, there's set the texture parameters, and we've got to assign it to S value, T value, R value, and clump to edge for all of them. So yeah, just to make sure that I show that I understand the work. This is basically everything here. So if I start the project, then open that. So yeah. So we got the frame graph here and frames here. Player FOV, we can increase that. The slider movement of that is something to do with the GUI menu issue, but it will just go back to speed because I've hardcoded that. Depth mode, so you can turn on depth mode and off. Increase the lighting, and then change the values of the lighting as well. So I was quite happy with being able to control the shader output at runtime. Then audio. I don't know if you can hear that because I'm recording, but they do work. And then if we load up the command prompt, and then oh no, do this here. Do gamepad on and then command prompt. As you can see, I can track my values. So left stick access, moving it around, right stick, and then left trigger, and right trigger, and then I can show the name of the controller as well. If you press shoot, I've got shoot working, but I didn't get the actual controls working. So yeah, I can move with WSD, I can move arrow keys, and then sprint, and go back to sprint. And then here, this is my second texture loading, so grass, so I managed to get it to be transparent. Same with the cubes. So if I had I feel like with what I've learned while making the project, I feel like I could implement shooting, but because of time constraints, I didn't manage to do it. But if I had more time and had the knowledge I have now compared to what I had before, I'll go back and implement shooting and get like enemies and collisions to all that to work, and then I'll implement models at like the last stage because I feel like if I've got a solid like movement system, shooting system, and enemies working, then models can be the last thing. So I feel like that'll be the case. I'm still happy with the project how it went, but obviously I want to focus on like shooting everything to match my full pitch. But I feel like at the moment with what I've got now, I've successfully have done everything I could. So yeah, thank you for watching.